There's one other reason I think why people believe cultural relativism, or at least why they say these sorts of things. Some people have the idea that this will be an aid to tolerance, that it's a tolerant position, that it's inherently tolerant, or that at least if we go around saying these things, then that will somehow promote the cause of tolerance, so that people will be less likely to persecute one another for different practices. Um, but arguably, there's nothing inherently tolerant about cultural relativism. Look, if your culture approves of forcing your ways upon people in other cultures, then according to cultural relativism, it is right for you to force your ways upon people in other cultures. And if your society doesn't approve of interfering with people in other cultures, then that will be wrong. So whether or not cultural relativism encourages tolerance, well, per se, it neither encourages tolerance nor discourages it. Whether it makes you more tolerant or less tolerant will depend on what your society approves and disapproves of. Um, and look, if you believe in some objective account of rightness and wrongness, then it may follow that you should be tolerant, that you should not force your customs on other people. I want to consider a different sort of objection to moral relativism now. And it's based on just a hypothetical imaginary case. Imagine that we have a woman named Juanita. And Juanita is faced with a moral choice. Let's say there's Juanita. She says, Hola. She's facing a moral choice. She wants to know, should I have an abortion? In other words, is it morally right for me to have an abortion, or would it be morally wrong for me to have an abortion? Now, according to cultural relativism, that'll be right if a society approves of it, and wrong if a society disapproves of it. And that's all there is to say about the matter. But now, what is her society? And let's just say that she belongs to several groups. For one thing, she lives in New York City. She's in the group of New York City residents. And maybe the majority of New York City residents would approve of her having an abortion. Then again, she's a Puerto Rican. She's from Puerto Rico. And maybe a majority of Puerto Ricans, or if you like, Puerto Rican Americans, would disapprove of her having an abortion. So it'd be wrong relative to that group. Maybe Juanita is a Roman Catholic. And maybe a majority of Catholics would disapprove of her having an abortion. Juanita is an American. Let's say she's an American citizen. Maybe a slight majority of American citizens would approve of her having an abortion, so it'd be right relative to them. Now the question is, would it be right for her to abort or wrong? And cultural relativism doesn't seem to give us a decent answer to this question. Because how do we know what the relevant society is? Is it the society of Americans? Why should it be the country? Right? Is an action being right or wrong? Does that really depend on kind of what borders of a country you happen to be performing the action in? That's a strange idea. Or is it the nationality of the person doing the action that matters? Go back to the first idea I just gave. Suppose you have a guy who's abusing his girlfriend. He's violent. He can't control his temper, and he's punching his girlfriend. And he's driving down the road while he's doing this, and then he drives from America across the border, across a bridge to Canada. And suppose that most Americans disapprove of his actions, so it'd be wrong according to cultural relativism, his punching his girlfriend. And suppose that a majority of Canadians, of course this is not true, it's just a hypothetical example. Suppose most Canadians approve of a boyfriend beating his girlfriend when she annoys him. Now, really, is it going to go from being wrong to being right just because he crosses the border? That's a strange idea. But anyway, the objection is that cultural relativism has the problem of saying which society it is which matters. If wrong means disapproved by a society, what society is it? Is it a country? Is it an ethnic group? Is it a religion? Is it a subculture? What is it? It doesn't seem to give any good answer to those questions, and so it doesn't seem to be a workable theory of right and wrong for that reason. Okay, let's go back to Rachel's discussion. Rachel's says a lot of interesting things toward the end of his piece, and you can break those interesting things down into 3 lessons that we can get from cultural relativism. His first point is there's less disagreement than it seems. If you just look at customs, at what is normally done in a country, it turns out those are the product of 3 different factors. There are moral beliefs about what kind of things are right and wrong. There are non-moral beliefs, which can be relevant, and there are physical circumstances. So let me give you 2 examples. One example is, are you required to share your extra drinking water? And society number 1 says yes, and society number 2 says no. You say, aha, that's a big difference of custom. That's a big disagreement. Well, yes, it is a disagreement, but it may be that society number 1 is located in the desert. And so they think, yes, you are obligated to share your extra drinking water. It'd be wrong for you to not share it because, if you don't, somebody's going to die. Someone might come crawling up to your tent and say, please, can we have some water? If you say no, they just may perish in the desert. And suppose that society number 2 lives in the jungle, lives in the rainforest. And if someone says, will you share your water? It doesn't matter if you share your water. Look, there's water all around. You can hardly get away from the water. Just find a big leaf and drink the water that's collecting on it. So the point of this example is there is a difference at the level of custom, but here this factor makes a big difference, the physical circumstances. And that's why there's a difference in what they say about sharing extra drinking water. As far as moral beliefs, they probably actually agree on those. So the general moral belief, the general principle would be something like, if you have some resource that's necessary to life and you have extra, you should share it with those who need it, something like that. And society number 1 and society number 2 would fully agree on that underlying moral principle, that you should share resources necessary to life if you have extra. So there's a difference of custom there, but there's not any big moral disagreement there. And you'd be sort of jumping to conclusions to think there's a big moral disagreement. Okay, here's another example. One society says you should never eat beef. Society 1 says yes, that is permissible, and society number 2 says no, you should never ever do that. And you say, aha, there's a big difference of customs here. Big moral disagreement, right? It shows that societies are fundamentally morally different. Well, perhaps not. I mean, maybe society 1 thinks that cows are just cows. It's an animal. It has value. You can't just do anything with it or kill it any old way. But if you want to use it for food, you can kill it and eat it if you do it humanely. Um, Society number two, though, believes in reincarnation. And so any cow that you consider might just be the soul of your grandma, your deceased grandma that now has been reincarnated, or some other person. And because of that, you shouldn't eat beef. Maybe you shouldn't eat any animals at all. Okay, so there's a difference at the level of custom again, but is there a big moral disagreement? Um, it seems like there's not a big moral disagreement. What results in the difference of custom is this non-moral belief that makes a difference. So again, society one that says it's okay to eat beef thinks a cow is just a cow. Society number two thinks a cow may have the soul of a human. And the societies may actually agree on the underlying moral principle that you should not eat a person. You should not eat the body of any, human soul, something like that. So again, there can be underlying moral agreement even though there's a difference of custom. And in this example I've given, the difference is due to a difference of non-moral beliefs. Okay. Finally, what other positive lessons can we learn from cultural relativism? Rachel says that cultural relativists correctly warn against the real danger of assuming that all our customs, prejudices, and moral beliefs are based on some absolute rational standard. So consider this: burial practices. Some cultures burn their dead bodies, some bury them, some leave them exposed to wild animals. Now, if you're in one culture, what the other culture does might sound outrageous to you, but look, it's not clear that there's a really big moral reason to prefer one over the other. Or in some cultures, it's permissible to belch after a good meal. Kind of means my compliments to the chef. And in other cultures, this is considered rude. But look, is it obvious that that's wrong to do? In some cultures, families take baths together. And there's nothing sexual about it, at least not obviously. Now, these don't seem to be moral issues at all. They seem to be issues of politeness and taste, or maybe decorum. And so you shouldn't assume that our different practices with our different assumptions about these things reflect any kind of objective, rational standard. And finally, Rachel says that we should allow our feelings and moral beliefs to be challenged because they may have no rational basis at all. They may just be the result of non-rational factors. Yeah, that's exactly right. When we should look into other cultures, we should be as open-minded as we can, and it may turn out that after we carefully think about it, their way of doing something is better than ours. Or it may turn out that our way is better, or it may turn out that one way is as good as the other. But you don't have to be a cultural relativist to say those things. You can believe that there are objective facts about right and wrong, and you can still agree with all three of these lessons that we can derive from cultural relativists.